I want to correct a historical misconception directly today because it affects how people on both sides of this conversation approach everything we've discussed so far. Walk into most bookstores' occult or New Age sections and you will find the Tree of Life, 10 circles connected by 22 paths, printed on tarot guides, hermetic magic manuals, and popular mysticism books, usually with no mention of where the diagram actually came from. The quiet assumption many people carry, including some Jews, is that Kabbalah borrowed this structure from some older, broader Western esoteric or Hermetic source. The documented history says the opposite. The 10 Sefirot originate in Jewish sources with no debated Hermetic or Egyptian ancestry. Sefer Yetzirah, likely composed sometime between the 3rd and 6th centuries of the Common Era, centuries before Islam, centuries before most of the medieval world that would later develop Hermetic philosophy as we now know it, already describes creation through 10 Sefirot of nothingness, together with the 22 letters. The medieval Kabbalists of Provence and Spain, figures like Isaac the Blind in the 12th century, and the circle around Azriel and Ezra of Gerona in the 13th century, developed this into the fuller architecture of interconnected Sephirot we recognize today, elaborated most extensively in the Zohar, which surfaced in Spain in the 1280s, associated with Rabbi Moses de Leon, and traditionally attributed to the much earlier sage Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. This entire body of work is internal to Jewish scholarship, written in Hebrew and Aramaic, developed by rabbis for a Jewish audience, centuries before it had any contact with what we now call Western Hermeticism. The migration into non-Jewish hands happens later, and it is well documented. In the late 15th century, the Italian Renaissance philosopher Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, fascinated by Jewish thought, commissioned translations of Kabbalistic manuscripts into Latin. Much of the work done by a converted Jewish scholar named Flavius Mithridates, and incorporated Kabbalistic ideas directly into his famous 900 Theses of 1486, arguing that Kabbalah actually confirmed the truth of Christianity, a claim that no traditional Jewish authority would accept, but one that shows unmistakably where he thought the material had come from. The German humanist Johannes Reuchlin followed with the De Arte Kabbalista in 1517, further systematizing what came to be called Christian Kabbalah for a European scholarly audience. From there, the material entered the broader current of European esotericism, Rosicrucian writing, later Freemasonic symbolism, and eventually, in the late 19th century, the ceremonial magic system of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded in London in 1888, which built an entire initiatory structure directly onto the Sephirotic Tree of Life, merging it with tarot symbolism, astrology, and alchemy into the specific diagram most people encounter today when they picture the Tree of Life in an occult context. This is the version Manly P. Hall inherited and studied closely, and to his real credit, Hall was honest about this lineage. In The Secret Teaching of All Ages, he treats Kabbalah as a distinct and serious subject of study in its own right, not merely as raw material absorbed into Hermetic philosophy, and he traces its transmission through the Christian Kabbalists with real care. The popular flattening Kabbalah is one flavor of the same universal Hermetic tradition as Egypt and Hermeticism is not how the most careful historians of esotericism or Hall at his best actually describe it. The more accurate picture is that Jewish Kabbalah is one of the primary source rivers feeding into Western esotericism, not a downstream tributary of it. Why does this matter for a Jewish audience specifically? because it removes a certain defensive posture that sometimes arises when Jews encounter Hermetic or New Age material using Kabbalistic sounding language and worry, understandably, that their tradition is being appropriated, diluted, or flattened into generic spirituality. The concern is legitimate. A great deal of popular occult and New Age Kabbalah does strip out the legal, communal, and covenantal context that gives the original material its meaning, turning a demanding, disciplined tradition of textual study into a set of decorative symbols. But the underlying material itself did not originate outside of Judaism and then get adopted by Jews to seem more legitimate. It is the reverse. If anything, when a Jew studies real Sefer Yetzirah and the Zohar directly in their original context, alongside the legal and ethical framework the tradition insists must accompany them, they are not importing something foreign. They are returning to the headwaters of a river that others, centuries later, diverted into different territory. There is a caution worth stating clearly, and it is one the tradition itself insists on. Classical Jewish teaching restricts serious study of these texts, historically requiring a student to be mature, grounded in Torah and Talmud first, and ideally studying under a qualified teacher, precisely because, disconnected from that grounding, the material can be misapplied or misunderstood, which is more or less exactly what happened when it was extracted for ceremonial magic in 19th century London. Interest in the tree of life is not the problem. Approaching it without the ethical and legal scaffolding the tradition built around it from the very beginning is where things go astray. In the next episode, we go from structure back to action. Tikkun Olam as applied universal law, and why a cosmic architecture this elaborate is worthless if it does not change how you treat the person standing in front of you.